Hello and welcome to Conscious Curiosities, where we unlock the wisdom of the universe which lies within. I'm Maria Luz, your host, an astrologer, certified hypnotist, and psychic medium. And this episode is entitled The Virgo Pisces Axis, Part 1. So every day I pull a tarot card for the collective and I write a haiku based upon its energy. And this morning's card was the Two of Cups, which feels appropriate as I sit down to write this episode. And the image on the card is of a man and a woman facing one another with serious expressions, holding out chalices toward one another. And between and above them rises a staff, similar to the caduceus, with two snakes entwined around a staff, and at the terminus is the head of a lion with wings coming from the side of its head. And I was thinking each set of sign polarities is about an aspect of choice. It's a reminder of our free will as humans and how the very same intention willed into a different expression has a very different impact to our physical circumstances. And with Virgo and Pisces, I see even higher stakes because we are now asked to explore not just the impact to our physical self, but to our spiritual self as well. And as the lunar nodes move into this axis from January of 2025 to July of 2026, and with the recent lunar eclipse just yesterday happening here, I think it's worthwhile for us to explore the energy of this axis. So in this first episode of a 3-part series, I will discuss the energy of the axis as a whole, and then in the 2 subsequent episodes, I'll go into detail on each sign and its associations to hopefully give you with a comprehensive understanding of what we are working with over the next year and a half. And it would be helpful to know where in your birth chart Virgo and Pisces fall. By that, I mean which of the 12 houses they reside in, and also to take a look and see if there are any planets in those signs. Because you may notice that some of the themes that I raise have significance in these houses, or the houses, remember, signify the areas of our life, or with the particular energy of the planets that you have in these signs. And of course, I always say we all have all 12 signs in us, and it's hard to isolate any one particular component of the birth chart. So things like the planets in aspect, to other planets or other angles also play a role. But I think to begin with, if you just keep in mind where Virgo is in your chart and where Pisces is in your chart as I discuss the axis today, would be helpful. But before we do that, I couldn't help but note that when the nodes leave this axis for Leo, where the South Node is going to be after July 2026, and Aquarius, where the North Node will be after July 2026, it will be a very different world. And I've noticed that time appears to have sped up after the pandemic, which was really just a time warp. I think a lot of people feel that way, but I don't know, maybe in the last year especially, it feels as though we've been kicked out of that time warp and we are in some kind of accelerated time place. So maybe it's just me, but astrologically anyway, July 2026 looks very different. And of course, as I was looking at when the nodes were going to end their time in Virgo Pisces, I had to look at the chart at that point. And that's why I could see how different it is, because at that point, Pluto will be established in Aquarius, where it's been dipping into a little bit. And it will also be at that time in retrograde motion when the North Node is entering Aquarius. And then Neptune will have left its spiritually oriented home of Pisces for the action-oriented home of Aries. Very different. And then Uranus will be in the quick air sign of Gemini, making a trine to Pluto in the other air sign, Aquarius. And Jupiter will be in Leo in opposition to Pluto. So two, heavy hitters in this opposing energy while the nodes are changing sign, one of them moving into Leo where Jupiter is. And then Saturn will be halfway through Aries, and Chiron will have finally left Aries for Taurus. So I'll put a picture in, I don't know how to do that on the podcast, but I will definitely put one in Substack where I post my companion analysis. And with this very Aquarian future in mind, let's come back to the present. I spent a lot of time talking about the Aries Libra nodal axis on my YouTube energy forecast, which I just ended, RIP. But the episodes are still there from April to September. I talked a lot about this healing that we were asked to do around that axis. So I won't spend too much time here. I will just assume that you, like me, took that call to action to really look at how we have masked and how we masked out of fear that our true self would just be too raw and it may be unlovable. And that made us kind of hide ourselves in relationships. So I think we've been doing a lot of reflection on how we behave in the presence of other people. So with that as a starting point, the next set of signs for the nodes, as I mentioned, are Virgo and Pisces, with the South Node being in Virgo and the North Node in Pisces, because remember, the nodes move retrograde to us, which I also think is super interesting when you think about time, because we're so used to thinking about forward motion and progress, but the nodes really ask us to consider what is in the past, what's in the present, and what's in the future, because they can't be cleanly separated. And so that is why they always work together as well as an axis. And so in my view, I think the North Node is held up as a marker of the energy we're meant to gain experience with for our evolution. And it doesn't mean that we want to abandon all of our South Node skills and forget all of our South Node experiences. And this is, I think, a huge lesson of this particular axis, the Virgo-Pisces axis. That which we choose to remember and what we edit out, and where the natural truth fits into that construct. Because Virgo can be a ruthless editor in its quest for the purest expression. But Virgo is also associated with the sixth house and the concept of lineage, of a style of craftsmanship. So when we look at mentorship, which is involved in lineage, we learn the wisdom really beneath the individual tasks that make up our craft. So rather than just going through the motions because that's what we're told to do, we end up through mentorship understanding the significance of each individual task in the whole of the craft. And so in that way, we are a responsible editor rather than just a ruthless editor. It's not about simplicity. It's about the efficiency and the discernment to know what is the simplest form that can serve the purpose for the collective. So already we can see how Pisces is part of this axis, because Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, holds wisdom, and Pisces represents the return of the individual to the whole. And there's also a Piscean timelessness, which is felt when one is in the flow of one's craft. Your hands move as your grandmothers did when you're making biscuits in the same way. You hold your guitar the way your teacher did. You lose track of time when you're lost in the midst of a poem that you are constructing. And in fact, if we are spiritually whole, when we interrogate our practical Virgoan motives, we wind up at Pisces. And I was thinking of an interrogation like this. Why do you exercise every day? Because it's good for me. Why is it good for you? Because it keeps me in shape. Why does it matter that you are in shape? So I can continue to play or travel or walk with my dog or my friends or my kids or my grandkids. And why does that matter? Because I love them and need connection. Or maybe even because I am divine and I honor that by taking care of my physical form. So having a meaningful response to that interrogation of why, then allows us to remain in what can sometimes feel like drudgery and stick with that work that lacks immediate gratification. But it's hard, and the temptation to escape where it is not so hard is always an option, especially nowadays where there's a quick dopamine hit that just lives in our phone that's never far away from us. And I began exploring this axis thinking of spiritual bypass because historically, this may have been one of the only escapes available, via organized religions. And spiritual bypass is something that is a risk as you are drawn towards Pisces. So in that context of religion, if heaven was on the other side of a day of hard work, or worse, if you were out there capturing or killing other people, it allowed one to escape that personal accountability that the Virgo side of this axis requires. And coming from working on our sense of self and how we employ free will while the North Node has been in Aries, we should know by now how our daily work impacts our sense of self, which is a good thing because it's easy to lose oneself on the Virgo-Pisces axis to either service, which would be the Virgo energy, or oneness with all that is, which is the Pisces side. You may still be the hero of your own story after all, but not without consistent and sincere effort and a connection to something larger than self. And in fact, Joseph Campbell, the professor of mythology and comparative religion and author of The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is the book that influenced George Lucas to create Luke Skywalker's hero's journey, Joseph Campbell had his North Node in Virgo and his South Node in Pisces. So the opposite of where our nodes are going to be placed, but on the same axis. And Campbell stated in The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, on his life and work, that when he could not attend graduate school during the Great Depression, he spent 5 years studying independently, during which he would, quote, divide the day into four-hour periods, of which I would be reading in 3 of the 4-hour periods and free one of them. I would get 9 hours of sheer reading done in a day. And I'm not actually holding him up as one who conquered this axis. Thankfully, that's not really a thing, but rather as one who struggled with it, as the rest of us will. There's a fine line between using a strong self in service to others and losing one's sense of self and getting lost in the collective. He spent many years absorbing others' teachings and in support of others' work before creating his own lineage and publishing his first book at age 45. And on the other hand, with my South Node in Virgo, conjunct to Pluto and Mercury in my chart, yes, I also have nodes on this axis, and so I am doing this deep dive for personal reasons. So with my South Node conjunct the powerful Pluto, which intensifies everything, and Mercury, which in a different way intensifies everything, I had this strong pull to remain where everything had to be strictly categorized. And, you know, the right to belong in its place had to be scrutinized. And I was really compulsively compartmentalizing. And I didn't realize that I was being equally pulled as that Pluto, you know, and Mercury pulling to the South Node. I was equally being pulled to the North Node in Pisces, but because I didn't explore it, I didn't understand it, it became this abyss, which is associated with Neptune and Pisces, and I escaped through alcohol. Until, of course, I didn't. And then I tried to explore what Pisces was all about. So when I switched from a clinical to a spiritual scientist, my friend Georgie texted me that term one day, and I just love it. It probably exists on the internet, but it didn't to me. So anyway, when I first got a grip on the abyss that I had fallen into, and had a clear head rather than just allowing that South Node to compulsively drive me, and I left my really clinical career, I initially thought I had to just completely edit out that old knowledge and experience, which is taking, of course, a very Virgo approach. So it's become so ingrained to you. I wanted to call that out, that even though I was on the surface switching completely to the woo, I was still habitually approaching it the same way that I had approached the very, traditional, or I don't even know if traditional is the right word, status quo way of doing science. So anyway, I was taking that Virgoan approach because it was comfortable, but and I was just trying to just edit out everything and going, making a new compartment to start fresh. But ironically, and maybe magically, Spirit waved its wand toward, of all things, LinkedIn, and I had only meant to just quietly make the update to my profile in case anyone was curious and wanted to see what I was up to. However, overnight, I accidentally outed myself, like, to all of the hundreds and hundreds of connections. And one of those announcements went out like, oh, Maria started a new career. Say congratulations. And of course, there I was in all my woo with the astrological, info and my birth chart as my backdrop. So, anyway, the irony is, to my surprise, I was wrong. Like, it wasn't fair for me to have that bias that those two worlds couldn't be in the same world. And I found that a lot of those colleagues that are very, conventional, they do have an interest in spirituality, or maybe even just a curiosity about what I'm doing. So anyway, I if I still needed that Virgoan proof, that the lines can and maybe must be blurred for the collective to evolve, then Spirit gave it to me there, which is very magical. And so the departing thought I have is just maybe this axis is like the glyph of Pisces, which, again, those two fishes that are in that endless circle. Or maybe it's like those two snakes entwined around the staff in that image that the Two of Cups tarot card has. The signs must exist together, and the energies always are at play toward harmony and healing for the self and the collective. And you are now empowered to be consciously curious about the Virgo Pisces axis. And please follow, review, and share this podcast if you find it helpful. I would also love to see you as a client. So please visit my website, marialuz.online, to see the astrology, hypnosis, and mediumship services. I also have a lot of astrology basics info on my website on the astrology tab. And you will find my written analysis and some free tools on my Substack, which is Maria Luz or Work. And I'll put the links and a coupon code in the show notes. I so appreciate you joining me, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.